Thanks again, and let me get started. So, of course, today I'm going to be talking about Silver47 Exploration. It's a company that's focused on U.S. silver development projects with resources on them, with really big upside, really good growth potential going forward. Like Arlen was just mentioning, we just completed or maybe just it's been a couple months now, but we recently completed a merger with Suma Silver, where we put together the asset in Alaska with the two assets in the lower 48 in Nevada and New Mexico. And I joined from the Suma Silver side, where I was CEO. But in total, to summarize the company, we've got 236 million silver equivalent ounces in the inferred category and 10 million silver equivalent ounces in the indicated category, all at about 330 grams per ton silver equivalent, split between two projects. Excuse me, split between three projects. And the idea here is that, like, we just see a lot of value in building ounces in the company and asking ourselves what those are worth in a market cap. And I'll get back into that in a little bit in the next couple slides. But our big picture goal here is to go for 1 billion ounces. And there's really two ways for us to do that. One is through the drill bit, which, based on my personal experience as a geologist, I think is very possible for achieving on our projects. And I'll try my best to show you why. But also, through additional M&A, we're always looking for like-minded companies and other projects that could really add value for us here. Our valuation in terms of ounces in the ground is very low, 37 cents per ounce on a silver equivalent basis in the ground. We think that's low relative to our peers, and I'll show you why in the next couple slides. And the last thing I just like to point out on this is that on the right half of this slide here is that hey, look, like the best projects, the best deposits really have strong drill holes. And all three of our deposits have these strong drill holes, whether it's Red Mountain at 36 meters at 672 grams per ton, move down to Hughes, 18.5 at 536, or even Mogollon, which has flown under the radar for so many decades, 31 at 448 grams per ton silver equivalent. And just as a geologist, as a benchmark, when I see things like that, I start to look a lot more closely at things that I'm reviewing and projects that I work on. Okay, so here we are relative to our peers. Like I was saying, we get about 37 cents on an EV basis in US dollars per ounce in the ground. Where you compare that to the BlackRocks of the world, moving all the way up through Dolly, Varden, and Argenta, great companies that are doing a great job. And they just get a lot more than we do, anywhere from 161 to $3.05. And hey, that's all good. But the argument I'm making here is I think this really demonstrates that we have a lot of catching up to do relative to our peers. But we're not just going to sit here and say, hey, therefore, you should buy our stock. No, we're really aggressively advancing our projects, all three of them, with a focus on Red Mountain, but all three of them, and we're financed to do that. We've got $27 million in the bank and have just finished a drill program in Alaska and are planning 3 others coming up in the next 12 months. Okay, I'll just briefly introduce the team here. Our executive chairman, Gary Thompson, founded Silver47, the predecessor to pre-Suma, and of course I founded Suma Silver. We put the companies together thinking that, hey, 1 and 1 might equal 3, and the timing was very good, and the stock's done, I think, very well so far. And we've put away a good-sized war chest to really add value to the projects. Our CFO Moz AgEq joined us from Suma Silver. Chris York, our VP Operations, also managed all of the drilling in the lower 48 at Suma Silver. Jordi Belfiore, who many of you might actually know, he's very good at reaching out to investors, is the VP IR. And we also just hired a project manager for the Alaska project based in Fairbanks, another very well-regarded geologist. Okay, just based on time, I'll go relatively quickly through some of these slides, but of course, this is very important. Our capital structure slides. So we've got 172 million shares outstanding, and at a share price of 87 cents, it's come down a bit from that. I think we're at 80 today. A little under $150 million in terms of market cap. Working capital, $27 million in the bank. From a shareholder's perspective, there's a really good mix between institutional and retail. And Eric Sprott is our largest shareholder at 9%. And one thing that I need to add to this slide is that we recently got research coverage from Research Capital, and they have a $2 buy price target on us now, which is available just by signing up, and we can also send it to you if you're interested. So the why silver slide I'm going to skip. I think it's safe to say that people on this call are interested in silver and know these things, but let me just keep going and start talking about the projects in a little more detail. So the first one I'm going to talk about is the Red Mountain project in Alaska, and you see a very nice scenery here. This is taken, I believe, just this past summer. drilling out one of the deposits there. Beautiful country. But what we're looking at here is 168 million silver equivalent ounces at about 335 grams per ton silver equivalent. And this really is, we're using silver equivalent, but this really is a polymetallic project that has several or many critical minerals in it, including zinc, lead, copper, a little bit of indium, a little bit of gallium, a little bit of antimony. And we're very glad to see that silver is likely being added to the critical minerals list in the United States. The United States Geological Survey just made that recommendation a couple months ago, and it's in the process of going through now. So basically everything in this deposit is great polymetallic critical mineral upside. And the only thing that's not a critical mineral in it is gold. But of course, gold is gold. So we just think that in the US, in the current political environment there, where there's just this focus on domestic supply, all of a sudden the critical mineral is all over the mainstream press. We hear about the fast tracking that's going on, and I think we're in a good position to take advantage of some of that with this project, but also with the 3 other projects. So let me just keep going forward here. I just want to point out on the map that the 2 deposits that comprise the mineral resource are called Dry Creek and West Tundra Flats. But there's also dozens of other showings, massive sulfide, VMS style things on the project here. And then over to the west, where it's more of a SEDEX type of feel here, that either they're not drilled or where they are drilled, there's some very interesting early results in a couple holes that haven't been followed up on, because you can only do so much in the time that you have, and there's just a lot left to do here. So to put this into perspective, this is 60 kilometers. Well, this is a VMS district, and some of the richest belts in the world, like say the Flin Flon, Snow Lake, Greenstone Belt, have similar footprints, and we've got all the good ground, or most of the good ground, and it's not really that well explored. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in and look at the Dry Creek deposit itself. We just finished a drill program here this past summer, put out the first set of about half of the results last week. I'll just highlight them. And what we're trying to do here, this is a long section. So this is the surface where my mouse is. And then each of these dots is where each of the drill holes comes through the page or the screen. So what we were able to figure out, just based on some early but detailed geological modeling, is there's these high-grade sections in here, high-grade quote-unquote ore shoots, that if we can grow the footprint there, the ounces there, they're going to be higher grade, and therefore that would have a positive impact on the resource. So 2 holes from this area that we drilled, 344 grams per ton silver equivalent over 12.3 here. And then tried to expand it a little bit, but just kind of missed, but still fine grade, 217 grams per ton silver equivalent over 8.4 meters. There's still an additional 5 holes from this zone pending that are just with the same idea. And we put out core photos from several of those holes, a couple of those holes that I think look pretty good, good visible mineralization in them over good widths. And now looking at the West Tundra Flats deposit, here it was more of a step out, or I would say maybe even step in type of exercise, where we have 2 holes that go into a resource gap here. Think about it like a donut hole, where both of them hit. Pretty good. 726 grams per ton silver equivalent over 3 meters, 1300 over 3 meters. And it's really hard to put this into scale, but there's 160 meters between these holes. So these are 160 meter step outs into areas of resource gap. And 160 meters is a long way to step out. Okay, this is more a little bit focusing on the critical mineral aspect of it. When I'm saying there's things at surface like 98 grams per ton indium or antimony, these have new domestic military and defense applications, steel applications that gallium isn't listed on here. Oh yes, excuse me, it is up here at 149 grams per ton. But gallium's worth a buck a ton, or a buck a gram. So here's 149 grams per ton. So these things, I don't expect them to be everywhere, but they can really help augment and amplify the value of the rock on a per tonnage basis. Okay, so the next project I'm going to talk about is the Hughes project in Nevada. And this is just a little bit of a tip of the cap of to the history of this really rich American historic mining area. It used to be owned by Howard Hughes, so we've named it the Hughes project. This is halfway between Reno and Las Vegas on the highway. There's about 44 million ounces of silver equivalent split between indicated and inferred, and then some tailings. And with the current metal prices, those tailings are becoming quite interesting to look at from a reprocessing perspective. We're doing some work on that now. And let me just zoom in and look at the project here. So, okay, so we have the eastern half of the historic Tonopah Mining District. Our project is in blue. And then our colleagues at Blackrock Silver have the western half of the historic Tonopah Mining District and its extensions in black. They've got a 107 or 108 million ounce resource compared to our 44. But they've done about 5 or 6 times as much drilling as we have. A lot more infill drilling and all that, and that's all good. But you know, we just see this as okay. Well, what's left to find here? And we always have seen it that way. So I'm going to just zoom in and look at some of the stuff that we've done. Here are some of our holes on the left, but not really to spend too much time on that. I just want to look at this map and that, okay, well, here are roughly where our mineral resources are, these orange and purple blobs, I'll call them for lack of a better term. That's where we've done most of our work. That's where we've had most of our success, and that's all good. But that's really only half the story. The other half of the story are these targets out here to the east that we're looking for an extension of the entire district. And I'm just switching the view here to look at an underground view. This is another long section, so I'm just going to point out the surface here. And then very roughly, all of these points are our drill holes. And this figure actually needs to be updated because we put out a few more results out here to the east last week. But the story is the same. So what happened really was that the veins, the old-time veins, run this direction. They ran into a fault zone here when they were mining them 100 years ago. And the old-time miners more or less lost them on the far side of this Halifax fault. But there's really no reason to think why, you know, these shouldn't continue out there. And okay, well, why do we care about that? Why is that important? Well, looking for an extension of the entire district. To the left of this Halifax fault, you know, there's something like 500 million ounces silver equivalent of total endowment, say, you know, between what Blackrock's drilled, what we've drilled, and what was mined in the past, over 4 kilometers. Well, we've got a 4-kilometer eastern extension of the district where we've got some really interesting, you know, sniffs to good zones, you know, 1450 over 3 meters, 392 over 3 meters. We have some infill holes just in this area that have similar intersections that are kind of narrow. So the big question is, okay, out here to the east, where's that main structure that's 5 to 10 meters wide and 1,000 grams per ton, like back here in the main part of the district? And how do we find it? So we're planning some pretty detailed follow-up here coming up in the say spring, late winter, early spring, to just test that idea and really search for that main vein. Okay, let me clear my drawings. All right, let me keep going. Okay, so the other project just that I'd like to touch on, of course, is the Mogollon project in New Mexico. In my opinion, this is probably the best remaining vein field left in the United States. It's really akin to the Mexican vein districts that the Spanish mined going back like to the 1500s. Some of the famous ones, except this one isn't really that well explored. There's a bit of mining here that took place between the 1880s and 1942. But production shut down in 1942 because that's when the United States went into World War II, so everything kind of stopped. There was a little bit of exploration done in the 80s and 90s that we're now kind of following up on. That was done by a very well-known group of Nevada geologists. So we drilled this starting in 2021, several seasons, and then just put out the first resource of 32 million silver equivalent ounces, all in silver and gold at 367 grams per ton silver equivalent, over this orange blob area, but incompletely. So incompletely covering 2.4 kilometers. You know, there's still lots of areas there we can just step out and keep drilling, keep hitting, I think. The big picture story, though, the rest of these veins, these red lines, are all veins and prospective structures. So there's in total about 75 kilometers of additional vein and prospective structure for us to explore over time. So we really like that. And the thing is, like, there's lots of good mineralization at surface. I'll get to that in a couple slides. But let me just look at some of the drill results here. So this is the first area that we drill. This is where the bulk of those resources are. You know, you get numbers like 448 grams per ton over 31 meters, 445 over 16 meters. You know, the vein is just in this area just so wide and very well mineralized, and that's a hallmark of a strong system. So another reason why we really like this project. And it's actually quite an interesting place to visit. Like, I'll just point out a couple things. This is the satellite photo. These are open stopes at surface that you can walk up to and look into. And there's just a very interesting history going back to the late 1800s here that is a bit surreal when you're up there visiting. But you know, a really important part of the story. Okay, so now I'm just looking at, again, in a long section. I like long sections because they're easy for me to explain things. This was that area that we were looking at just on the last slide, and I'll just draw it on here to make it simple. So this is that area. That's where most of our work is. That's where most of the resources are. But there's also some really interesting things going down to the south here where, okay, there's not really much drilling or any underneath this old Everly mine that we acquired a few years ago, or no work beneath this Deadwood mine that we also acquired a few years ago. So, the idea here is to build what I would think would support a quote unquote critical mass, within this 2 kilometers over the next couple of years. We're going to be back here drilling probably in about a month, give or take, and just keep stepping out in this direction and building ounces, stepping out 100 meters at a time, which again is very aggressive, but has worked for us before. We're very confident in geology, and incrementally building ounces here as we move forward. And then just the last thing, I know Arlen's got his hand up. This is the last slide. The regional potential. So we were just looking at on the last slide, we were just looking at about this area here. Well, look, there's lots of other high-grade samples at surface that we collected, anywhere from hundreds to thousands of grams per ton over an area that's like 5 kilometers by 9 kilometers. They're not explored, not drilled. So that's where we see the really big picture upside here. And that's why I say, hey, I think this is, a great opportunity. And it really might be akin to some of those Mexican vein fields just a little further south. So that's why we're excited about it. So thanks, Arlen. Yeah,
awesome.
That's it.
Yeah, awesome. That's a good update. 27 million cash. Where is the majority of that money going to go? Like what project?
Yeah, so the most advanced project right now is the Red Mountain project. That's got the 168 million silver equivalent ounces. That's the one that's the furthest along, and that's really our concentration right now. But of course, we can't drill there during the winter. It's Alaska, but we're planning to have a minimum 3-rig drill program there starting in June of next year. And that's another reason why we liked this transaction when we put the companies together. It's that we can now drill throughout the season, throughout the year. And if ever there was a time to be aggressive with the drill bit, I think it's when silver is trying to push back through $50.
Yeah. And nothing wrong with being in Alaska right now.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. Why don't you actually touch base? We got a couple minutes on that. It's getting a lot of attention in Alaska. Can you touch on the political landscape there and just like how Round Mountain fits into all that?
Yeah. So, I think really it comes back to like let's start at the grassroots level. Like Alaska is a state that, is very resource rich. It's a resource-based economy. Whether it be oil and gas up on the North Slope or mining in many different areas. Now, of course, that being said, there's still environmental sensitivities like there are everywhere else, and that's a good thing. So, but you've got big gold mines there, Pogo, Fort Knox, things like that have been operating for decades. The zinc mine that Teck operates, Red Dog, it's really is a good frontier to do exploration. And I think if this project was in Ontario or Quebec or in Manitoba, any of those VMS belts that Canadians know so well, like this would have been explored and gone a long time ago, right? So that's part of the interesting opportunity. But then like moving upwards from the state level to the federal level, and obviously Alaska is a focus for Secretary Burgum and for the Trump administration in general, but so is mining. So we're seeing things happen all over for mining in this administration with Fast 41, with just that critical minerals deal announced with Australia the other day. I think that like big picture, like both sides of the aisle have realized, hey, wait, like we need some of these critical minerals, and we don't really want to be getting them all from China or other third world dictatorships. And look, like we have a lot of them here in the US. Let's cut the red tape and let's let our businesses operate and entrepreneurship win.
Yeah. It's hard not to be all in US mining right now. That's my humble opinion. So
yeah, that's the best way to put it.
Yeah, awesome. Galen, thank you so much. Your time's up. Great job, great update.
Great.
And we'll stay in touch. Thanks so much.
Okay. Thanks, Arlen. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.